Welcome to Massive Signals, where we explore the companies defining the next wave of deep tech and the inflection points that took them from lab to market. I'm David Mandel, joined by my co-founder Ari Newman. Each episode, we go deep with founders, investors, and researchers driving breakthroughs in energy, quantum, AI, defense, and the new space economy. This is Massive Signals. Welcome to Massive Signals. On today's episode, we're speaking with Dr. Liz Dennett, founder and CEO of Endolith. Liz is an astrobiologist and geomicrobiologist by training, who spent years studying how microbes interact with rock and metal in extreme environments, work framed through an early Earth and Mars lens, before deciding the real frontier was under our feet, not in space. Today, Endolith uses engineered microbes and real-time genomic data to pull copper out of the low-grade ore and mine waste that the world has already dug up, dropping straight into existing heap leach infrastructure already used by large mining companies. Liz discusses everything from why the copper problem is an extraction problem rather than a scarcity one, to what it took to get a company like BHP to bet on biology, to the live lab-to-field transition happening right now as Endolith moves into its first mine site trials. We hope you find this discussion as insightful as we did. So, Liz, super excited to have you on the pod today, and just an incredible story that would be way too difficult for me to actually explain. I mean, you went from NASA-funded astrobiology research on early Earth and extraterrestrial conditions to Endolith CEO. Like that isn't a crazy arc, and I'm sure it started even before that. So take a few minutes, kind of explain to us who you are, give us a little brief overview of like how you ended up talking to us today, and give us some of the kind of key highlights along the way, and then we'll dig in deeper after that.
All of this makes more sense when I say it together, or it makes more sense than it might initially seem. But I grew up in a little town in Alaska. So imagine a young Liz, very eldest daughter energy, working or living in a place where we spent most of our time outside looking at mountains. My dad was a geologist. And first off, when you grow up in a rural environment, that teaches you things because you have to be scrappy, you have to fix things. But also when you spend all your time outside camping and fishing and just looking at rocks, you get this natural deep appreciation and this love of type 2 fun. So that is really the foundational origin story. From there, my PhD was studying how microbes interact with both rocks and metals in really extreme environments. And I was looking at those systems through the lens of early Earth and potentially other planets like Mars. But the reality is that biology doesn't care if we call it astrobiology or mining. And microbes have been interacting with metals for billions of years. And so combining all of those things, after my PhD, I was an oil and gas geologist, I was at a startup, I spent time leading energy data platforms at AWS because I decided I wanted to go to the cloud. Before, long story, much less long, ending up here. The central idea to all of this, though, is the interesting things tend to be really, really small, like bits and bytes and microbes, and those can have global impact.
Awesome. And so one of the things I heard you say consistently, which is super interesting to me, as you went through this arc, is you said like the real frontier turned out to be under our feet, not in space. Right. And so was that like a gradual realization over time of your career? Was that a specific conversation? What was like that real transition from someone? And look, I know you're a big space fan and Jackie too, like, but what was the real moment where you realized like, oh my God, like it's not really all about out there. It's really about right here.
Yeah, I wish there was some awesome lightning bolt eureka moment where I'm running through talking about density, but no, it's actually a series of just a slow realization that the problems that I loved and found myself thinking about when I was out walking or on my bike also happened to be these enormous industrial problems. So it wasn't really the time. It was much more looking at the common thread of all of these big society level huge problems and realizing that to me, they trace back to microbes and things happening on a molecular level. Once a scientist, always a scientist. What can I say?
Got it. And I've got one more question. I know Ara's got a bunch, but like we should have started like explain to us like what Endolith is actually doing. So everyone
that was actually my question.
Knows where we're coming from.
For the folks tuning in, what is it that you do?
Yeah. We are using microbes to get more copper out of low grade ores. And we're starting with the piles in our backyard right now.
So what does that mean? Like, be more specific, kind of walk us through, because when you talk about microbes in mining, are you starting up new mines? Like, give us the Endolith approach.
So the best place I have found to find copper is places there is already copper. Let me take a quick step back. The planet needs so much more copper in the next 25 years and beyond. So much. We can get into those numbers. But most of the copper on Earth is trapped in these low-grade ores. When I say low-grade, I mean less than 0.5%. Typical ore grades in some of these mines are like 0.3%. And the way that is extracted is a process called hydrometallurgy. They take rocks, they crush them, they make these massive heaps, and they put sulfuric acid on them. You can add microbes to that sulfuric acid and get more copper out. That is what Endolith does in a nutshell. More broadly, we enable existing mines to get more copper or get more critical minerals, which means we can squeeze more into the supply chain now. And the way we do that is through a really unique combination of microbes and cloud computing and a bunch of other cool stuff.
So I think it's a really interesting approach, right? You're able to enhance something that's already happening. You're not coming up with a completely novel mining process. So you're the turbo on the naturally aspirated engine, if you will.
A lot of that is by design. I started my career in oil and gas, which I thought was a very conservative industry, very hard to move into. Mining is so different. It is very orthogonal to a lot of the vectors and industrial applications I've worked with. Its safety is paramount as it has to be, but mining companies are risk averse by design. And so we've built everything to be fully plug and play. No downtime, no 100 million capex for a new piece of equipment. It is meant to be modular and you're off to the races. It also means that we can squeeze every last drop out of the mines located just down the road.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this intersection between microscopic biology and how you're leveraging AI models to come up with the solution?
I would say that Endolith couldn't have existed a few years ago. It's really sitting on the shoulders of all these giants and these new technologies. When we think about heap leaching, like the mechanism and how the microbes work, that is not something that is unknown. The biology is able to do the work. Microbes have been doing this for billions of years, but it is at the intersection of the cloud computing and the microbes that we can understand it. So sequencing DNA, getting real-time data, getting data from the field, uploading all of those means that we are able to leverage the ability to observe these communities, measure what they're doing, look into the mechanisms, and improve them continuously. And that has shifted. So the leap isn't, can the microbes do this? It is how we can make it measurable, reliable, and commercially deployable at industrial scale. And that is the biggest gap that something like cloud computing brings in.
And I mean, there's a big jump, right, from being able to see the microbes working on something in the lab and observing it under a microscope, and then seeing it work at scale out in a
Absolutely.
copper mine, right? And where are you in that evolution?
I was just at our field site earlier this week. So we're in the field right now. Just to double click on that in terms of how the scales are different. Microbes are 1 micron in diameter. You can take a piece of your hair and line up about 1,000 of them. These heaps that we're talking about are miles and miles long. So the dichotomy between those two things, first off, is mind-boggling. But secondly, it really goes to show that even when we're doing stuff in lab with 50 kilo columns or with larger columns or even smaller columns, you are already taking microbial mechanisms and scaling them up very significantly. And then the field is just few hundred orders of magnitude between friends.
And so you're already in the field. You're already applying this approach. Are you in terms of company evolution? Is this essentially a pilot phase, or are you working with multiple miners and adding your technology to their facilities at scale already?
We have been working for the past few years with 5 of the largest copper mining companies out there. This is our first full field deployment, which, just for some background on the company, we closed our Series A late last year. We have grown from 14 people to 21 people in the last year, and we're laser focused on showing that this works in the field. In terms of how field demonstration works and that progressive scale up, we are working really closely with our partners to say, hey, what kind of proof do you need? How can we improve this? And really, it's about making the biology recovery repeatable under representative operating conditions, different ore types, different temperatures, things like that.
And when you're working with these mining companies, have any of them like looked at what you're doing and say, nah, not for us, and like passed on you guys? Or is like when you talk about what you're doing, because it seems like it's adding optimization and actually revenue to what they're already doing, right? Which is what I think is beautiful about your business model. But like, what's the reception been from the industry? And has it been difficult from either a personal perspective as a female CEO working in a real
Yeah.
oil, gas, mining industry, or the technology side? Like, what have been the real challenges getting this adopted from the industry?
Mining companies move incredibly, incredibly slowly. They don't want to know that this is the next cool thing that's going to change everything. That whole move fast and break things mentality, do the exact opposite of that. What that looks
Right.
like on a day-to-day basis here is Christy, who leads technology, spent 20 plus years at Freeport. She is the happiest on site at a heap leach. And Andrew, our CCO, was at BHP for 25 years. So the reality is I get to go in and talk about the vision, but at the end of the day, there's been a lot of mining startups that have not worked. There's been a much smaller number that have worked. Earning the right to operate in what we do is not one conversation. It's not one interaction, one test. It is showing up safely and repeatably demonstrating performance day in and day out.
Was the BHP validation a big watershed moment that sort of got the mining industry to go, okay, this can work?
Yes, and I feel like for us, we had been fortunate enough to be working with BHP as a number of customers. And most customers don't want their name out there. They don't want to do a press release. They are very, very skittish. So for us, we asked, like, can we go public with this? So I guess taking a step back, there's two ways to answer that. One is actually getting the press release out and amplifying that. That was great. But the cooler part is I remember I was giving a talk at SME, which is the big mining conference. It was in Denver 2 years ago. I was going to talk about the platform as a whole, but we had just finished this data. The science team had just looked at it, made graphs, and we'd had permission to share it. And I remember redoing my graphs in Python before I went on stage, being like, this is we did duplicates and triplicates. We had lots of this looks really solid, and double checking with the science team, like, have we done everything we can to disprove this? I have a poster in my office you can't see that says, what can be destroyed by the truth should be. And that to me, I think, was the Eureka watershed moment, was like replotting it every way, and then going into ChatGPT and just being like, hey, if I have data that seems really good, how could I disprove it? What are some other explanations I could make, et cetera? And that data has since been reproduced numerous times on different ore.
Very cool. So we've got a lot of founders that are starting from zero or very early on, obviously watching the podcast. And we love founders like you that have had a good journey so far, and hopefully will be a much better journey moving forward. Talking a little bit about the evolution and how you got it there. You kicked off with a pretty oversubscribed seed round in 2024, which we were super excited for you. 18 months later, like I think you had a killer Series A, right? So,
yeah,
like, what's changed?
Covered it.
Like, you know what? Yeah. Good for you, and I'm glad they did. And congrats, and you deserve it. And you deserve it. But like, what was the answer? Like, what changed in this story between those two raises? Structurally, we focus on massive signals here on key inflection points, right? Yeah. So what were the key inflection points between those two stages that you think really kicked off the great funding and the great growth of the company?
I think this change was evidence. At Seed, it was a compelling technical hypothesis and really early validation. I'm pretty sure one of the investment memos just read like reason, founders vibes. It was a charisma saving throw, which the day that we went public with that, TechCrunch covered the exclusive and we got into TechCrunch Disrupt. And honestly, that was probably the best day of my life so far. I shouldn't say that I've done other great things, but to me, that was a very salient day that I just remember going outside the office and like screaming in front of my car, being like, and then over the next 18 months, we did everything in our power to substantially reduce the uncertainty. We had a lot more data. We had customer validation. We had a much clearer path from science to field deployment. And for us, we had an incredible group to come together for our Series 8. The Wall Street Journal covered it to celebrate. I made everyone come to the office and watch K-pop Demon Hunters, and we had pizza and cake. There was a little pushback around that, but the next day people were singing Golden in the lab, so it was fine. But the core part of that clear question, the key thing was not that we eliminated risk, but we were able to systematically reduce the uncertainty around what our progression looked like and who we wanted to be as a company.
Perfect. And you mentioned Wall Street Journal covered the people that invested in this interesting group, but Squadra, Draper, Collaborative Fund, Overture Climate, that's a really interesting mix of generalist firms, climate-focused firms, deep tech, military tech. How do you think about who you work with and let in as a CEO and who you want on your cap table next to you? And did anyone, in the process, say no for a reason that really stuck with you and made you change your kind of thought process?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so much
that's kind of like a double-edged question. But
there's 6 questions, David. So let's take them.
I'm sorry. It's just I love talking about how you form your cap table and your investors in your group.
Which this is a very interesting one, because when you go out to fundraise, fundraising is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's harder than the last full Ironman I did. It is absolutely brutal. The highs are highs, the lows are lows. And at first you have cycles of optimism where you're like, everyone wants in, and then cycles of no one wants in. What are we doing wrong? Is this going to happen? For us, though, the one consistent rule has pretty much been a no asshole rule. And I want people that give us critical feedback, that give us the truth, that say the hard truths, but don't do it from the point of their own ego, that do it for the betterment of the company. Also, you have to understand that this is not B2B SaaS. This is not a 6-month software adoption cycle. You need investors that can hold the technical ambition and the execution discipline on their heads at the same time. But we're a diverse team. I have a diverse background, and I wanted different thoughts around the table. When we ended up going with Squadra as our lead, I had probably half a dozen investors reach out and just be like, why? Why would you go with a traditionally national security focused investment team? And first off, anytime you're a CEO and someone says, why are you doing that? That doesn't make sense. That is one of the best moments, because you can poke at that confusion and you can poke at that uncertainty and challenge assumptions. 10 months later, no one has that question. They're like, that was a smart play. You really skated to where the puck was going there. But it was primarily driven by the caliber of the individuals we were working with at Squadra. And then coupling that with the climate and the deep tech and just broad venture experience, I think it's really fitting, because copper sits really at the intersection of all of those things.
So let's talk more about that. I wanted to ask you some questions, right? So what you were just explaining about Squadra, where on the surface it wasn't obvious given their NatSec focus, but copper is now like a critical mineral, national security interest. So just for people that are listening, let's just slow this down. What happens in the next 10 years if we can't produce enough copper or acquire enough copper in the United States?
It is going to be very, very bad. Modern civilization runs on copper. Electricity powers hospitals, transportation, it powers water, communications, and the data centers. Every single thing runs on copper. The demand is significantly increasing. My favorite quote is, I heard that between now and 2050, we're going to need more copper than in the history of human civilization. Which, if you think about that, did either of you recently see The Odyssey? Have you seen it yet?
Not yet. Going this weekend.
I saw it last night in IMAX. It was great. But there's a line at that that's talking about being in the Bronze Age. That Bronze Age was fed through copper. This has been a throughput all along the trajectory of human civilization, and all the easy stuff is gone. So now we're processing lower grade, complex material that takes 10 to 16 years to find a new mine. And they are in really remote and difficult to extract places. So it is a very open question. None of the analysts, I used to work at WoodMac with an incredible team of analysts who thought a lot about copper, and none of the answers are succinct, pretty soundbite, we're going to make our way through and it's going to be okay type answers.
So copper is literally the primordial stew backbone for technology, future infrastructure, and advancement of the human race. We don't have enough of it. it's very difficult to extract. And you're showing
Yeah.
up at a moment in history with a significant new biological technology that can be a drop in for what's already
Yeah.
going on in copper mining.
Yep.
So not the company is at an inflection point because you're now proving what you developed in the lab out in the field, and it's happening in a moment in global history where it's never been more critical because the easy access copper went away.
Yeah. And there's two things. One is that I think it's actually more fundamental that like the copper is a primordial soup. The copper is the water that the primordial soup needs to live. So every time you read about a new industrial technology, whether it's a semiconductor technology or an LLM, they need the copper to do absolutely everything. It is so absolutely foundational. The second piece with that is politically over the past, 6 to 12 months,
Mm.
there has been emergence of some new classes of mining companies, new engagement by the government. So in addition to having that fixed demand, and we're hoping to make supply more elastic, there have been some secondary and tertiary factors at play that make this an incredibly interesting and robust estate.
Yep. I mean, the critical minerals conversation wasn't even happening 2 years ago. So it's, this is definitely an interesting time. What, one more question to follow on with that. So given all of that setup, what holds you back, or what steps do you need to go through in terms of your crawl, walk, run evolution to sort of get to full blown scale where Endolith is solving problems for every copper mine on the planet?
We need copper miners to say, hey, come take this rocket ship ride with us, come set up on site. Let's have a stage gate process where you earn the right to go from lab to field to full commercial deployment. That is what we need. We're progressing a lot of great relationships, but mining companies are inherently risk averse. So finding the right partners where it's good geology, good safety record, and just that startup type attitude, that is what we need. If you are listening and have a copper mine or know someone that has a copper mine, give us a call.
Perfect. And
Perfect setup.
is this industry a little bit of a slow at first, all at once? Like as soon as a couple of miners take the bet with you, get the results, everyone else lines up, or are they just going to move like a underpowered freight train for the next decade?
I think time will tell. Traditionally, mining companies had relatively large R&D teams internally, so they were able to move increasingly slowly over time, but those teams have shrunk and they are more dependent on external technologies coming in. So I don't quite have enough data to answer that, but I remain relentlessly optimistic. That said, every ore is different. Every mine is different. Everything is a little bit of a unique snowflake. That's part of why we built the platform to take in data science so that we're able to lean into those really tricky, hard to extract ores. But we foundationally need to earn the right to be everywhere. And that means getting to know our customers, spending time with them, looking at how we can not just be a drop in solution, but really help them unpack their unknowns in the field.
Mm.
Hey, so I'd like, if it's okay with you, I'd like to switch to a couple more personal questions although it pains me to have to ask these questions, I think it's important because, there's a common but difficult question we often hear from female founders. And, you've kind of done an amazing job here. Talked in the past about asked when you were doing fundraising or potentially even in meetings that you don't look like a CEO, right? And so what did you do in the room when that's been said? Has anything like that happened to you since you've actually had a term sheet and building a business? Has it changed? Give me some thoughts that would help other founders like you that are trying to build businesses understand what happens, and some good thoughts.
Yeah. So in general, I have a lot of general, I have had a much less rocky ride than a lot of my female colleagues and people from other underrepresented minority groups. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, I am a 5'10", blondish, purple-haired woman, like cisgendered women, which makes my life a lot easier in many ways. I have learned early on that when someone says something that strikes me the wrong way, there's a few things to do. And these are some of the best takeaways I've ever had. One is approach it with humor and be like, I could totally do that. More power. Two is broach it with confusion and be like, why would you ask that? I don't understand. Or three is to directly call them out and be like, that's actually an offensive thing to say. Recently, I got number 4, and in my business card case, I haven't had to use these yet, but I have these little cards that just say nope.
Oh, I love that. God, that's perfect.
To other friends, other people, when we're talking about how to balance all of the things, like you can actually say, it turns out, I've recently learned this, I would prefer not to talk about that right now. You can just say that. No is a complete sentence. So those are just some empowering tools that I have used. Yes, being a woman with purple hair pitching mining technologies gives people assumptions to work through. I like to lead with my credentials sometimes. Sometimes I don't, and I'm happy to let people not or make assumptions what they could be. I have been focused recently on the past 6 months is, as I talked about earlier, going from C to Series A was its own separate journey, and going from Series A and beyond is another inflection point. And so I'm working with some great leadership coaches to really look at what that level of CEO requires. And the more I find that I'm turning inward to answer those questions, the less space I have to engage externally or to even think about it. I'll just take it as an assumption and just go with it.
Good. And hopefully that those coaching stuff is helping. Like, I talk to many CEOs, and it's funny. Too many of them think they don't need a coach. They think, oh, I'm just going to figure it out. And they forget that this is not something they've ever done before in most cases, right? And they need to learn this stuff. And so
there's parts of it that are massively dependent on people. You can't automate every process when you don't have the same thing going through, because every org type is different or because you're actively growing. And I have found that Zoe, one of the great coaches I work with, is great at reminding me that, like, no, this level of chaos is to be expected. This is normal. The more you can embrace that and just realize that it's people working with people, we're all doing our best, the better you can stop striving for this elusive perfection goal that doesn't exist. And even if it did, should not exist because it wouldn't serve us.
Perfection is a myth. It is a journey, right?
Yeah.
Just a little better every day. That's what
right. Yeah. David and I talk about this all the time, that coaches need coaches, and everyone needs and benefits from being able to see, the forest through the trees for themselves, and to be on that growth and evolution journey. Slight tangent, but related. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've chosen to build your team?
Well, in Denver, which has a lot of great things going for it, I love Denver. Our team in general is over 50% female. Mining is typically about around 15%, and it's also incredibly interdisciplinary. Like when we were first getting founded, I would joke that someone just put up the bat signal for all geomicrobiologists with experience in microbial iron cycling at low pH to come here, which we actually have a lot of. And now that team is diversified to include a lot more engineers, a lot more data and software background, and we're working on some of our operations components. So it's super interdisciplinary. Our core values are everywhere. I have a little poster up here that says, focus is deciding what to say no to. But these are the things that we embody. And it's when you're CEO, you get to set the values and you get to determine how they get done. And so ours are things like safety is non-negotiable. We love type 2 fun. We're going to invent our way through challenges. And it used to be critical feedback is our love language, but now it's say the hard thing and do something about it.
I like that. And your team is 50% female. Did that happen organically, or was that by design?
It actually might be closer to like 60% now. I'm not even sure. It has happened because that is where the most talented, best people we have found. It is nothing other than being next to School of Mines, which has some incredible engineering and bioengineering programs. And also, I think when people are looking up companies to work at and they see someone who posts prolifically on LinkedIn, like I do, about whatever is top of mind to them, there is a sense of hopefully genuine candor and being like, hey, if I'm going to choose a startup, I want it to be one that's going to be fun. And I appreciate the people there.
Awesome.
Well, you also are providing real leadership in a very old school industrial industry. And I think, to your credit, like you've really educated the market, you've brought light to it, and your approach to the industry is refreshing. And I'm not surprised that you have been able to attract top talent as a result.
I would add that your approach not only to the industry, but to leadership is also refreshing. And it's been a pleasure talking to you over the years and watching you grow the business. And so kudos to you. I just wanted to say that.
I do appreciate that. I try. And sometimes I make mistakes. Sometimes I have to re-examine how I'm doing things, and it's a process, but it's a really fun one.
Yeah.
On the Colorado thing, since we're all here in Colorado, what's it been like building a company here? I mean, you talked about mines and the adjacency to talent, but sort of in the macro, like, is it hard? Are there miners here in Colorado? Are you on the road all of the time? How is it running the business from here?
Yeah, Colorado is a really unusual combination. The talent pool is deep. You have mining heritage here, you have School of Mines, you have National Lab of the Rockies, that is formerly known as NREL, and you also have aerospace, a lot of people working remote. And we exist somewhere on the verge of that. But I think the more empowering thing is people that live in Colorado love type 2 fun. They love things that are not necessarily fun when they're doing it, but are fun later. That you cannot find a lot of places. And culturally, that I think is the secret sauce from Colorado.
Yeah. I'm one of those people too, so I understand.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
So tell us, before we kind of start wrapping up here, tell us a little bit more about where Endolith goes next, right? So you've done a great job going from seed to A. You're in field right now. You're proving your thesis, which must feel amazing, right? And where is your vision for Endolith, right? So 5 years from now, maybe 10. Well, let's say 10, because we know the industry moves slowly, right? So like 10 years
I'm
from now.
thinking shorter platform, like shorter.
Okay, great.
Like what would be different a year from
better.
now?
Yeah, great. Perfect. That's like, where's your vision? Walk us through where Endolith goes and how it conquers all.
Everything continues on plan. A year from now, I would love to say that we've demonstrated repeatable field performance across a number of ore types. We have our field-ready biology that's been deployed, and we've generated enough commercial evidence to transition from proving it works to really locking in and beginning to scale our first commercial deployment.
Got it. And so let's say it's working. Okay, let's assume, we have no doubt.
Yeah.
So let's assume it's working, right? And you're accomplishing what you set out to originally accomplish. What is next? What's the big vision?
Oh,
I know it's hard sitting in your office as a CEO worrying about down the road, but you kind of have to when you're worried about getting to tomorrow. But what's the bridge from making it work to where Endolith really goes next?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was just writing a memo. We have a board meeting not too long, and I spent most of the day yesterday with the door to the office locked, whiteboarding, thinking through what's the vision, what are we doing, what are we saying no to, what are we not doing. And to me, it becomes the operating system for heap leaches in general. We've seen a lot of growth in mining, even in the past few weeks. We've seen rounds from Mariana Minerals, from Adams, where it is the trend that I have seen is that it's becoming increasingly easy to get the material to the heap or to the extraction process. And for us, that's traditionally been a black box. Us unpacking that and allowing every drop of whatever the critical mineral is. We're starting with copper oxides, copper mixed sulfides, enabling that to be part of a complete end-to-end process with our data and our technology. That's the big vision. Because it's great to say that you're going to produce more material or you're going to take on a new mine, but ultimately being able to do that isn't just about the drilling and the crushing and stacking the material. It is about making sure you have positive feedback cycles that are driven with your reagents, and microbes happen to be nature's best reagent.
So I want to talk more about that. I'm so curious, right? So you're already in the lab to market turn in terms of the first critical inflection point. The next one sounds like, if I could summarize it, like it's sort of repetitive scale. You have multiple things going on in the field that are beyond the pilot, but starting to ramp up. As you think about the board meeting and the memo, without giving away any secrets, is there a quantitative set of data or a quantitative number of engagements or unit volume metrics that will say, I'm ready and we are at our next scale up inflection point? Or is it sort of a bleed up kind of thing? I'll know when I get there.
It's much more to have a map. If I'm going on a long hike, I like to at least have a directional sense to follow cairn to cairn on the trail.
I thought you said you like type 2 fun. Don't you go out into the woods with no compass?
Storm could come in. And so For us, it's more about reducing the uncertainty. Are we generating the evidence that moves us in the right direction? What, how are we preserving the option to respond to whatever changes to the macro environment may come what do we earn the right to build next? Those are some of the key questions. Early in the company, we did work on lithium, on nickel, on iron, and on copper before deciding on copper. And typically when people say, oh, what's next? We talk about being a platform play, expanding into the other critical minerals. But the reality is mining landscape is continuing to change. We're seeing new vertically integrated software first mining companies emerge. So we always have to be challenging those assumptions and talking to customers to see that we can build what they want and not just, oh, if we build it, will they come?
Yep. So there's some scale and repeatability with copper. Then there's also the evolution of the business against the vision that you've set. So
yeah. And I think where companies can excel at these inflection points in a spectacular way is making the boring stuff, or making what's now the exciting stuff the boring stuff.
One of the things that we see often in deep tech is that revenue is actually the lagging indicator, not the leading indicator. The whole world is often wired towards like SaaS or software, where revenue begets scale.
Yeah.
And in deep tech or lab to market companies, sometimes the revenue is the last thing to kick because you had to do all the foundational work first. And it sounds like there's so much incredible opportunity for you. You've already de-risked a lot of that. And it's really about all of these things coming together in this next phase.
Yeah, the revenue piece is really interesting because it is very easy to chase revenue for things that will not move the ball down the field. I think I've used like 3 different sports ball analogies here. Excuse me. But it's very easy to say yes to projects that will bring in 10, 20, 50, $100,000 without fundamentally moving the things that you need to do to be more ready to build those commercial processes at scale. And so having investors that understand that and are willing to take a slightly longer term view has been really critical. It is why focus is deciding what to say no to.
Love that. Yeah, super interesting. And I think that provides a lot of clarity on how you're thinking about evolving and growing the business.
So I have one quick question, just because you said it again and you said it twice now, and it's I can't tell you how many times I have this conversation with founders we work with. Focus is what's knowing what to say no to, right? Brutal prioritization, right? Where was that switch for you? Because I know like the mentality of most founders is, I need to get everything done, right? To feel good about myself, I have to be checking things off my checklist, right? And the reality is, you and I know the checklist never gets smaller; it only gets bigger. Right? Yeah. So, what was the transition where you really got it? We're like, oh my God, this is not about getting everything done; it's about getting the right things done at the right time.
It actually came when I was working at AWS, probably close to 10 years ago. And I was a solution architect. It's kind of like a pre-sales engineering role where you just build awesome solutions for customers. And at one of our orientations, they were like, look around. These are and everyone I worked with was absolutely incredible. They were like, you guys are all used to outworking your jobs. You cannot outwork this job. You absolutely cannot. And your career will be decided by the things that you pass on and if those were the right judgment calls. And for me, that was an eye-opener. So I was like, challenge accepted. I can outwork any job. I'm incredible. I could not outwork that job. And it required me to start to, 1, learn when to ask for help, 2, learn when to ask for different prioritization, and 3, to really start top down on, is what I'm doing absolutely mission critical? And then when you become a founder, when you're just a few people, you have to do everything all the time, all at once. But there was a point when we were leading up to Series A where one of the guys on our board, who I have a lot of time and respect for, his name is Guy, kept saying, Liz, more wood behind fewer arrows. Like, you need to not be flying to give this conference. Like, you cannot be doing all of these things. Focus on what you're doing. And I was like, but it served me so well to date. And then you realize that you bring brilliant investors around the table because they have like an N equals many hundred companies, not just your N equals 1 deep knowledge. And that was a big theme. And it's taken me probably until now to be like, sorry, I can't give this talk at this conference. This is a really cool project. We'd love to partner with you, but we just don't have the bandwidth right now.
Awesome. Well, congrats to you on getting that insight and having a board that can help you understand that earlier, because that's a transition that we've seen takes way too long for a lot of founders. So good for you. So
I just got that poster made a week ago. That's a new poster. It just got up there because I need a daily reminder.
That's a great poster.
I'll send you the PDF. You can get it printed in any copy shop and then put it in a cute frame.
So Liz, given how busy you are, please, I'm giving you almost a year's warning. Please just reserve one day for us next May for the Deep Tech Summit.
Yes. I love the Deep Tech Summit. I met, I think, a third of my cap table at the Deep Tech Summit. It was absolutely incredible.
Can we quote you on that?
It was right down the road. No, it was, I got to lead a discussion last time, but I met Squadron for the first time there. I think I met Draper for the first time there. It was incredible.
All right. So we're going to start wrapping up. We're going to shift into what we call rapid fire mode. So we're just going to shoot a couple of really quick questions at you. Kind of quick top of your mind answers would be super helpful. And I'll let Ari kick it off.
All right. My first one is, what's one thing that really frustrates you that most people actually don't understand about your company?
Microbes are our biggest advantage. They're not a liability to be managed.
Awesome. All right. So what is, in your mind, what is a founder red flag? I'm sure you've spoken to a lot of other founders. You've seen a lot of pitches. What is a founder red flag in deep tech that you think most investors dismiss because the deck is too good or the technology is too exciting?
Lack of self-awareness and emotional intelligence.
All right. Critical minerals we talked about earlier, mining, it's all having a moment. What's the most overhyped marketing claim that's not based in science that people are talking about they've got wrong?
That one technology is going to magically solve this, that there's a deus ex machina that's going to pull us out of these deficiencies.
Perfect.
Awesome. Last question. What did we forget to ask you today?
I'm not sure if she froze or we've stumped her.
That's a real stumper.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
Favorite book I've read lately, or what's one thought living rent-free in my head these days?
Oh,
those are good questions. We're going to put those on let's go with the second one. What is one thought living rent-free in your head these days?
This topic of heroic responsibility. It comes from a Harry Potter fan fiction called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality I've been listening to. It's on audiobook. But this idea that if you want to be a hero, like a Hermione or a Harry Potter, you can't just do the thing that would make sense in your role. You have to take it on, all encompassing. It doesn't matter how the outcome got there. You are the person that has to make that happen. It's not just enough to say, I told my teacher they should do something, but no, ultimately, end of the day, everything stops with you. It's something I've talked to the team a lot in terms of safety. When you're in the lab, when you're in the field, you have that heroic responsibility. I don't care if you're afraid I do care if you're afraid, but you should be able to tell anyone to stop work, to make sure they're wearing the proper PPE. And if you don't feel comfortable in an environment, it is on you to make sure that you're advocating for yourself and others.
That is awesome. And I would say that your words are illustrated through your actions often. So
there's a counterpoint about that leading to taking on too much and potential burnout that I've still been really thinking through how to do that, because it's not the best advice for a lot of people, and not everyone should have heroic responsibility around a lot of things.
Can heroic responsibility also mean leadership, delegation, choosing what to say no to? It's not just taking on all of the work, right?
It's a nuanced topic, and this is why it's been living rent-free in my head.
Very cool.
I have a birthday in a few weeks, and so I like to be a little bit more sentimental leading up to my big birthdays.
Oh, congrats.
Well, happy early birthday. And we can't thank you enough for coming on the Massive Signals podcast. This conversation was super interesting, and you are
always
awesome.
Excited to speak with you. Yep.
I've enjoyed all of our conversations. You're always welcome to come back in the lab. We'll have you on site for Endolith Day next year, which is not really a thing, but we're going to make it a thing. But this was truly my pleasure.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again, Liz. Thanks for tuning in to Massive Signals. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, and share the episode with someone who cares about the future of deep tech. And subscribe to our Substack at massive.vc to stay in the loop on all of our current investments, thinking, as well as upcoming events like our quarterly deep tech table dinners. Find it all at massive.vc. Until next time, keep listening for the signals that are shaping our future world.